And welcome back as we focus on Chapter 8 and securing information systems. Here we introduce the need for both security and controls in today's businesses in order to safeguard information systems. There is a difference between security and controls. In my past experience, specifically with Ernst & Young, I had the opportunity to review and or audit several control processes that were in place over financial information systems. Can you think of an example of a security technique and an example of a control that might be used in a business? So here we look at the main categories of threats to information systems. Note that when large amounts of data are stored digitally on computers and servers and in databases, they are vulnerable to many more kinds of threats than when they were stored in manual form on paper, in folders, and filing cabinets. When data are available over a network, there are even more vulnerabilities. Have you ever lost data on your computer? What was the reason? I'm going through an issue right now with my own personal laptop, and unfortunately, Best Buy had to assist with this process. On the other hand, digital records are not vulnerable in ways that manual records in a filing cabinet are vulnerable. For instance, you really can't tell who has accessed manual records or when in a physical file. In a database, though, file access is monitored. Obviously, unless a hacker has found a way to read records without even leaving a digital trail. The architecture of a web-based application typically includes a web client, a server, and corporate information systems linked to databases. Each of these components presents security challenges and vulnerabilities. Floods, fires, power failures, and other electrical problems can cause disruptions at any point in the network. The graphic illustrates the types of threats to system security and the points over the network at which these threats are prevalent. Some problems occur at the client computer, others through the network lines, corporate servers, or in corporate hardware and software. Here we discuss the types of threats that large public networks such as the internet face because they are open to virtually anyone. Think the fact that the internet is so huge that when abuses do occur, they can have an enormously widespread impact. And when the internet becomes part of the corporate network, the organization's information systems are even more vulnerable to actions from outsiders. The internet was not designed at inception to be a secure, quote-unquote, network, such as, for instance, the telephone system network. We all get junk spam telephone calls, but hackers have not been able to take control of your telephone or systematically disrupt telephone service for individuals. Security threats are also related to wireless networks. Local area networks using the 802.11 standard can be easily penetrated by outsiders armed with laptops, wireless cards, external antennae, and hacking software. Hackers use these tools to detect unprotected networks, monitor network traffic, and in some cases, gain access to the internet or to corporate networks. Today, Wi-Fi routers ship today with pre-installed security protection. This slide identifies the various types of malware that threaten information systems and computers. Have you ever had a problem with a virus? Do you know how they got infected? Note there are now thousands of viruses and worms targeting mobile phones, and applications such as Facebook, Pinterest, and blogs are new conduits for malware and spyware. Malware is a serious problem. Over the past decade, worms and viruses have caused billions of dollars of damage to corporate network, email systems, and even data. Here we continue the discussion of the types of malware from the previous slide. Note that SQL injection attacks are the largest malware threat. Why do you think this is so? Ultimately, these attacks enable hackers access to underlying databases that support web applications, such as sales of products and services, e-commerce financial data, and other classified information. In other words, the database is where the information is located. SQL databases have little or no built-in security once a hacker gets beyond the entrance point to a corporate network. Here we look at the people who commit computer crime and the various types of computer crime. Can you identify the difference between hackers and crackers? And if you agree with that level of differentiation? Have you ever been the victim of computer crime or invasion of privacy? Think about and research what the ultimate purpose of spoofing and sniffing are. There might be legitimate uses of sniffing. Sniffers can help identify network trouble spots or spot criminal activity on a network. Sniffers can also be used to identify copyrighted data being sent over networks, such as pirated music or even video files. What is the result of a DOS, or denial of service attack? The Maori botnet was responsible for a large-scale DOS attack that disrupted the operations of Etsy, Netflix, and other major websites. Bots and botnets are an extremely serious threat because they can be used to launch very large attacks using many different techniques. Have you ever encountered any of these types of crime personally? The U.S. Congress addressed the threat of computer crime in 1986 with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. This act makes it illegal to access a computer system without authorization. The text lists other legislation to counter computer crime, such as the National Information Infrastructure Protection Act in 1996, to make virus distribution and hacker attacks to disable websites federal crimes. We need to think about the fact that cybercriminal activities are borderless. The global nature of the internet makes it possible for cybercriminals to operate anywhere in the world. Another source of security problems: people inside the company with access to the system. Have you ever worked somewhere with a vulnerable password system? Have you ever revealed to anyone what your password was? What are some solutions to password security? Some financial institutions assign users a new password every day or even every hour. There's many security and other vulnerabilities caused by software errors that open networks to intruders. Equifax software was hacked in 2017, resulting in the loss of personal information of over 150 million people. Why do you think complete testing is not possible with large programs. Can you think of an example of how inadequate security or control can pose a serious legal liability? The text gives us the example of BJ's Wholesale Club, which was sued by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission for allowing hackers to access its system and steal credit and debit card data for fraudulent purpose. Here we look at the business value of security and control, examining the legal requirements for electronic records management. Note that the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was designed to protect investors after the scandals at Enron, WorldCom, and other public companies. Sarbanes-Oxley is fundamentally about ensuring that internal controls are in place to govern the creation and documentation of information in financial statements. Because managing this data involves information systems must implement controls to make sure this information is accurate and to enforce integrity, confidentiality, and accuracy. Security, control, and electronic records management are essential today for responding to legal actions. Note that in a legal action, a firm is obligated to respond to a discovery request for access to information that may be used as evidence, and the company is required by law to produce those data. The cost of responding to a discovery request can be enormous if the company has trouble assembling the required data or the data have been corrupted or destroyed. Courts impose severe financial and even criminal penalties for improper destruction of electronic documents. To improve security for a firm's information systems, it's important to create a framework that supports security. This includes establishing information systems controls, understanding the risks to the firm's information systems, and establishing security policies that are appropriate for the firm. This slide looks at the controls used in information systems. Remember, the controls are methods, policies, and organizational procedures that ensure safety of an organization's assets, accuracy, and reliability of its accounting records, and operational adherence to management standards. Controls may be manual or automated. Can you explain the difference between manual and automated controls? i.e., making sure that computer storage areas are secure versus automated virus updates. There are two main types of controls: general controls and application controls. General controls apply to all computerized applications. A list of the types of general controls appears on the next slide. Can you identify what the functions are of the different types of general controls? Here we look at another important factor in establishing an appropriate framework for security and control: risk assessment. Although not all risks can be anticipated and measured, most businesses should be able to identify many of the risks they face and understand their potential loss. Here we illustrate sample results of a risk assessment for an online order processing system that processes 30,000 orders per day. The likelihood of each exposure occurring over a 1-year period is expressed as a percentage. The expected annual loss is the result of multiplying the probability by the average loss. Here we look at the need for a firm to establish a security policy for protecting a company's assets, as well as other company policies the security policy drives, and how information systems support this. Here we also look at the area of security policy involved in managing identities of system users. Why might businesses consider it important to specify which portion of an information system a user has access to? What kinds of information requires very high levels of security access? What roles might be used to determine access rules? One role is need to know. These two examples represent two security profiles or data security patterns that might be found in a personnel system. Depending on the security profile, a user would have certain restrictions on access to various systems, locations, or data in an organization. The graphic illustrates the security allowed for two sets of users of a personnel database that contains sensitive information such as employee salaries and medical histories. Excuse me. One set of users consists of all employees who perform clerical functions such as inputting employee data into the system. All individuals with this type of profile can update the system, but can neither read nor update sensitive fields such as salary, medical history, or earnings data. Another profile applies to a divisional manager who cannot update the system, but who can read all employee data fields for his or her division, including medical history and salary. These security profiles are based on access rules supplied by business groups in the firm. This slide continues the discussion of essential activities a firm performs to maximize security and control, here looking at planning for activities should a disaster occur, such as a flood, earthquake, or power outage. Disaster recovery plans focus primarily on the technical issues involved in keeping systems up and running, such as which files to back up and the maintenance of backup computer systems or disaster recovery services. Credit card firms, for instance, maintain a duplicate computer center to serve as an emergency backup to their primary computer centers. This slide specifically looks at the role of auditing. An MIS audit enables a firm to determine if existing security measures and controls are effective. This chart is a sample page from a list of control weaknesses that an auditor might find in a loan system in a local commercial bank. This form helps auditors record and evaluate control weaknesses and show the results of discussing those weaknesses with management, as well as any corrective actions management takes. The graphic illustrates a sample page from an auditor's listing of control weaknesses for the loan system. It includes a section for notifying management of such weaknesses and for management's response. Management is expected to devise a plan for countering significant weaknesses in controls. Here we look at technologies used for identifying and authenticating users. Which of the various authentication methods seem to be the most foolproof? Passwords are traditional methods for authentication, and newer methods include tokens, smart cards, and biometric authentication. An essential tool used to prevent intruders from accessing private networks is a firewall. To create a strong firewall, an administrator must maintain detailed internal rules identifying the people, applications, or addresses or addresses that are allowed or rejected. Firewalls can deter, but not completely prevent, network penetration by outsiders and should be viewed as only one element in an overall security plan. The firewall was placed between the firm's private network and the public internet or another distrusted network to protect against unauthorized traffic. Here we look at additional tools to prevent unwanted intruders and software from accessing the network. What antivirus and anti-spyware tools do you use? Do these tools require continual updating? Now we switch to wireless network and the technologies used to secure those. Introducing the use of encryption to ensure that data traveling along networks cannot be read by unauthorized users. This slide discusses the use of encryption to ensure that data traveling along networks cannot be read by those unauthorized users. Can you explain the difference between symmetric key encryption and public key encryption? In symmetric key encryption, the sender and receiver establish a secure internet session by creating a single encryption key and sending it to the receiver, so both the sender and receiver share the same key. Public key encryption uses two keys, one shared or public and one totally private. The keys are mathematically related, so that data encrypted with one key can be decrypted using only the other key. To send and receive messages, communicators first create separate pairs of private and public keys. The public key is kept in a directory, and the private key must be kept secret. The sender encrypts a message with the recipient's public key. On receiving the message, the recipient uses his or her private key to decrypt it. A public key encryption system can be viewed as a series of public and private keys that lock data when they are transmitted and unlock the data when they are received. The sender locates the recipient's public key in a directory and uses it to encrypt a message. The message is sent in encrypted form over the internet or a private network. When the encrypted message arrives, the recipient uses his or her private key to decrypt the data and read the message. Here we look at the use of digital certificates as a tool to help protect online transactions. Digital certificates are used in conjunction with public key encryption to validate the identities of two parties in a transaction before data is exchanged. Digital certificates help establish the identity of people or electronic assets. They protect online transactions by providing secure, encrypted online communication. Here we look at technologies and tools for ensuring system availability. Why do you think online transaction processing requires 100% availability? Note that firms with heavy e-commerce processing and firms that depend on digital networks for their internal ops require at minimum high availability computing, using tools such as backup servers, distribution of processing across multiple servers, high capacity storage, and good disaster recovery and business continuity plans. Now we look at concerns specific to cloud computing. What do you think are the key factors to consider in ensuring a provider has adequate protection? For instance, downtime, privacy, and privacy rules in accordance with jurisdiction, external audits, and disaster planning. Now we look at securing mobile systems. What specific concerns are there with mobile devices? One very common security breach involves employees losing phones while traveling. In some cases, the rule is lose your phone, lose your job. Mobile devices such as tablets will increasingly store a considerable amount of corporate information. Then again, if the data is largely stored in the cloud and passwords are required for access, then the threat is reduced. Ensuring software quality as a way to improve system quality and reliability by employing software metrics and rigorous software testing is extremely important. Ongoing use of metrics allows the Information Systems Department and end users to jointly measure the performance of the system and identify problems as they occur. Thanks for your attention. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.